First of all, we wanted to thank GMIC and the Chinese people for making our trip so far, and I think I speak on behalf of the panel. Very productive, and I think we've enjoyed ourselves tremendously. I wanted to, before I start going into introductions, I wanted to get a feel for the audience composition. What percentage of, who has a mobile app? If you can raise your hand. Got it. And the people who have mobile apps, I'll assume everyone has an Android app, but how many of you have iOS? Okay, so we can break up the topic a little bit.
I saw more iOS.
I saw iOS, but I'm assuming everyone in China has Android as a default. I wanted, first of all, to go around the room, and I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, but I think we're very fortunate to have this panel. AppsFlyer, AppsLar, and Kashava represent, I would say, 50% or 60% of all tracking for user acquisition in the industry. I think that's a safe number to say. And James Peng has been on my board for Mobile UI Fellowship for quite some time and has been a fellow panelist. And I would say that he's one of the top 5 guys I know on user acquisition. So definite industry expert. I want to start the introductions with Charles.
Sure. So I'm Charles Manning. I run Kashava. We're a measurement company that does attribution and post-install analytics for mobile, so all the different mobile platforms.
I'm James Peng. Good to be here. I'm head of user acquisition and monetization for a company called Storm8. We're the parent company of Team Lava, Shark Party, and FireMocha. And we have over 50 million monthly active users and 600 million downloads to date across 400 million devices.
Oren Kaniel from Netsflyer. We are a mobile advertising measurement platform, and that's a pure software service. We have clients from all over the world. Actually, we work with a few of the largest internet companies here in China going globally, so that's, I feel very comfortable in this panel. And it was quite an intense half a day here, like the last 2 years. So.
Good afternoon. My name is Dayton Keene. I'm with AppsLar. I'm based in our San Francisco, California office. Like many of these individuals, AppsLar focuses on both analytics and attribution, but a main focus for the company is helping both brands and advertisers around user acquisition as well as retargeting new engagement.
Great. I think the discussion will blend between user acquisition and growth a little bit, and we'll focus outside of China. I think that'll be more interesting for the vast majority of the people here. Last couple weeks has been a monumental shift in the user acquisition space with Facebook announcing that they're going to be their own ad network, and you can obviously see similar rumblings throughout the space. Couple questions. I'll start with James. How strategic is Facebook? How successful has it been for you? And what percentage of the overall spend do you use for Facebook currently?
So Facebook is an excellent partner for us because they provide something in the marketplace that not a lot of other ad networks provide. One of the biggest struggles that we have is ad networks generally are blind, and when we buy across these networks, we don't know what we're getting, and it's really hard to sort of distill down where the value is coming from. And so, you need to be able to focus, your spend where you're getting value. And so Facebook allows you to do that by, buying exactly where you're going to get valuable users and be able to do so on a very large scale with as many users as they have. And so, they're only expanding their scale with their announcement of the advertising network. But, we use it quite aggressively. I won't reveal the exact percentage, but I know many of my peers and competitors are spending upwards of 50% of their budgets on Facebook.
Got it. Charles and the rest of the tracking guys, you're seeing it from a really global perspective. From an advertiser perspective, what percentage of the spend is usually going on Facebook currently, and are you seeing that number going up? Number one. Number two is, how is the pricing looking on that platform?
You bet. So from our perspective, so we have companies like Disney who use us globally, FunPlus here in in China, people like Machine Zone, who's one of the biggest advertisers in mobile, and no doubt, everything that James has said, it's precision and scale. So targeting and just huge scale. And from our perspective, in this interesting kind of inside view, because you can see all the different advertisers, where are they advertising, how effective is it, how deep is it, how much are they doing iterative optimization, and for us, easily from a traffic volume perspective, not from a click-through perspective, but from an actual conversion, we're at 35–40% of our customer base. Traffic volume is there. And so from a budget perspective, I'd say it's all market-driven. It's certainly higher than it was 6 months ago. But
actually, what we see is, well, I can understand the statistics that you just mentioned. Totally makes sense. For us, when we started working with Facebook, actually Facebook is very interesting. Maybe I'll spend a minute there, but
Please.
But before that, I'll address the question. When we started working with Facebook, it immediately captured almost 25% of the traffic of the install. And now, during 2013, we started to work with highly demanding advertisers, like advertising craving for more installs. And there is a limit for what Facebook can generate, actually, right? Because they're very preserving the user experience. They're not going to bump your newsfeed with all these ads. So this is exactly what they did with the network, so allowing you to get more volume, more targeted volume. So working with these high-demand advertisers shifted from 25% to 30% of Facebook down to maybe 10 to 15%. Now it's up back to 25. But what I'm trying to say is that the ad network, or the audience network, that they introduced last week, can really change things again, allowing advertisers to acquire targeted users with scale. And this is something that they just could not do up until now, or to a certain level.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything different than what Charles or Oren pointed out. I mean, we have seen a massive migration from a spend perspective. You know, can be upwards of 50% where advertisers have concentrated their efforts on the Facebook network. So it is a trend that I think is here to stay. But I do agree with James. There is a lot of traditional frustration that has spilt over from the desktop days into mobile around transparency. And so I think you'll continue to see advertisers work with networks, with partners that can give the utmost transparent relationship.
Just to add a little bit more to that, I mean, in addition to Facebook, you can see like additional products being available out there, such as Twitter working with MoPub and them offering more targeting, Google offering more targeted, more targeting, more data towards their search and YouTube ads. But it's only giving us more options as developers and giving us more strength and ability to choose. So we don't necessarily have to allocate our money towards ad networks where that don't reveal who the sources of traffic are. I have the ability to choose and find out take where I have the most ROI and where I'm going to get the most value.
Just to follow up on that question, how's your experience been for RTBs, to acquire users?
RTB is it's interesting. I think I like it because when you buy an RTB, you have a good sense of you have identity of traffic. You can tell what sources you're buying from. I think one struggle is that RTB traffic is also sort of it's very tricky. If you buy on several different sources or several different DSPs at once, you can easily be bidding against yourself. And that's one struggle. But I do see it, and everyone says it's really hard to decipher which RTB or DSP is better. Everyone has an algorithm that they're not willing to reveal, right? But I will say that it is a different source of traffic that's necessary, and that we find a lot of value in as well. It's just finding sort of that niche that works for you.
Just a quick follow-up question for you. From a geography perspective, as you look at North America versus Europe, maybe EFIGs, or Latin America, how is your UA strategy different, or is it the same? How are you pricing those geos out? Are there any areas that people in the audience should potentially look at, maybe for iOS versus Android?
Yeah, sure. So I would say iOS strategy is completely different than Android. They're two completely different beasts, and you need to treat them differently as well, especially when you go into different geos. In the tier one markets, there's a little bit less discrepancy, but it's still very wide open. Meaning, like in the U.S. market, it's obviously the most expensive out there. I think when you buy an Android, you need to be much more careful than buying an iOS. And iOS, you tend to have much more, I would say, homogeneous, or not homogeneous, but consistent user base, consistent user value across different publishers because of, I think it's devices and the sort of level of a certain type of customer it is, or a certain type of user. Whereas in Android, I see a huge discrepancy even in tier one markets from high value publishers to low value publishers. And when you take this from tier one to tier two, meaning like Europe and eFigs, that gap only widens. And so, one thing to point out when you're marketing to eFigs, you need to be a lot more conscious of things such as localization is so huge. When you're marketing to an app to let's see, when you're talking about Fig specifically, you need to address each of those individual countries differently. For example, you might be able to get away with a localized version in Germany or Spain, but that's certainly not going to fly in Italy or France. So you need to understand these specific markets. And like on the Android side, you also need to maybe prepare different versions, prepare different sort of monetization techniques. You need to be able to have different revenue collection techniques, such as sometimes different carrier billing, different relationships in order to do so. But basically, you need to be able to adapt to those different markets and able to be able to even buy on that in the first place. Because there's some geographies that I can't even buy on and be profitable without these other strategies or without having the right sort of monetization mechanics in place. So I would say, every different geography, you need to think of who the customer is, how they're going to be paying for it, how they're going to be playing your game, and sort of the psychology behind it, and the path through your game. So be very conscious about every step when you're buying. Put yourself in the shoes of your customer.
Yeah, just a word to build upon what James was saying, that when you're thinking of doing user acquisition, it's always really strategically important to think about the monetization strategy and how you're going to make money off that user. Oftentimes, I've seen advertisers spend money to acquire users, and there's no way to monetize them, and they'll look like the user is not a quality user, but in fact, there's no way for them to pay. And especially as you go internationally, that's an area that people should really focus in on. Wanted to take it back to the app tracking experts on our panel. As you look over the next, say, 3 months or 6 months, because I want to make sure that we can give the audience some actionable information. What do you see are some of the big challenges from a global perspective, and kind of how do you think they're going to be solved?
Well, a few things. To echo what James said, you could take everything that James just outlined and say, oh, I got to do this and do this and do this and do this, and I would agree with all of that if you're going to hit every one of those markets. But the point is, if you're not going to do all those things, then decide where you're going to spend money in user acquisition, because that is what's required to be effective in all those regions. So if you can't or you don't have the budget to do all the things that James just articulated, and for each one of those regions, you've just very clearly deciphered where you're going to spend money, which is a function of your initial set of optimization. So, I think that's like ground zero. Next step is that monetization path. We have customers who effectively have never-ending budgets because they have cracked the code on how they monetize, and they either monetize through in-app purchases or they monetize through engagement vis-a-vis their own offer walls and their own CPI deals, which is key. But in terms of the next 6 plus months, we'll probably do a lot of the same kind of things, but optimization. Well, let me back up. Measurement is paramount. I don't think you're going to hear anything different from this team or group of folks. You have got to measure so that you've got a baseline of what you're doing. And then once you identify where things are working, you then have an opportunity for optimization. But there's no chance to optimize anything by device, by region, by day part, by any one of these vectors unless you're clearly measuring as a baseline.
I think that it's no matter which business, you just need to stay in business. And staying in business is making profits. And profits composed of revenue minus costs. And you need to make sure that you're in a positive area, right? So that's the same business. I mean, we are mobile, this is new, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, that's business. And in business, you need to measure, like James just said. You need to make sure that you know each and every dollar that you spend, where is it now, where is it today, and how much money did this specific dollar make to you. Now, you need to treat user acquisition as investment, but there are a few benefits. When you are buying stock market and you're buying stocks, when everybody wins, you win, and when everybody loses, you lose. But when you buy media, that's different. You can stay profitable forever because what works for you doesn't necessarily work for the other person. And if I'm working with Facebook or specific audiences in Facebook or specific, I don't know, the know-how that you have in the company can continue make money while everybody else are losing. So that's the difference. So you need to think of investment, but you need to think that this is not regulated, so you can do stuff, and there is something that you can be profitable because it's not a zero-sum game like in the, well, it's not in stock market, but when everybody loses, you lose. So that's not the case.
Just one follow-up comment. Really around, I think the market has to look past the install. Most early entrants into user acquisition will hire networks or partners based on a CPI, a cost per install, but we rarely get fired on the CPI. We get fired on the LTV. So that's something that most advertisers will address sooner than later in their life cycle. I think the gaming industry has probably done the best job at measuring acquisition post-install based on lifetime value. But as you saw from the earlier presentation, we have adoption coming from other verticals in finance, in travel, in retail. And naturally, when they first get into the space, they're doing cost per install campaigns or initiatives. And the net is they should be measuring that much more on an LTV measurement than anything else.
James, I wanted to build upon the theme that's just going through. A couple questions. What are the key KPIs that you measure at Store and Aid, number one? Number two is, how quickly are you able to get to a predicted LTV?
Good question. I would say definitely the key ones are start with revenue, right? So I'll look at, it's very key for me to look at sort of day 1, day 3, day 7, day 30, and so on revenue. These are, obviously that's the most important thing to me. So, making that money back, and that allows me to also get a sort of quickly predict what I might get once I understand the revenue curve of the user. So, if I have information, I can sort of estimate, what I'm willing to pay based on the trajectory of that user and the profile along the different channels that I buy on. It's also very important for me to understand different retention metrics or different engagement metrics, such as again day 1, day 3, day 7 retention. These are metrics that help me to understand. These are sort of leading indicators that I can sort of share with my ad networks to help them to sort of identify key pockets of traffic before they monetize. So help me to understand whether or not there's publishers I shouldn't be buying on, there's channels that just aren't working for me, or there's other areas to optimize. So I'd say those are probably pretty simple, but to be honest, the key KPIs are not complex. Eventually, it's the LTV.
Are you guys, from a macro perspective, maybe in other verticals, are you seeing different KPIs, or are they pretty much the same across the board?
The presentation before this I thought was really good. And one of the things that was interesting was that 40% of the installs were coming from gaming, 7% of the in-app purchases were coming from gaming. But that's an easy feedback loop because all of those transactions are being tracked at the App Store level, so it's easy to report on that. What you don't see from a report like that is the volume of commerce and travel apps that I'm sure these guys see as well, but our customers who are commerce and travel, those are the second and third tiers by volume, and what they're tracking is nothing short of impressive. On the travel sector, we've got customers who are tracking total number of trips booked, when hotel is linked to that booking. On commerce, we've got empty shopping carts, shopping cart values, and shopping cart completions. On the gaming side, as a leading indicator, welcome flow completion has a 40% higher chance of an in-app purchase by D3 than a non-welcome flow completion. And it's a function of, again, back to that measurement component. If you nail that and you expose it visually in a meaningful way, then the customer, like James, these buyers, have a clear understanding of X equals Y equals Z versus kind of shooting in the dark. And I guess the quick answer is on the commerce side, it's still value. It's just not through the store. It's just purchased directly. Just
a follow-up on the LTV comment. Gaming clearly has the shortest window, where if a gamer is not seeing monetization in the first week, it's almost a loss. Where if you look at anyone in travel or e-commerce, the LTV window might be up to 6 months or 9 months. So it's a much longer scale. And I think that's a challenge for the industry as a whole, because many of the user acquisition leaders are coming out of the gaming space and now moving into companies in travel or into retail, and they're sometimes bringing those same KPIs with them. And it's just a much different model to look at and much different set of KPIs to manage by.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, what we see is that higher LTV clients have more time, efforts, resources into investing into user acquisition because they have one app. Right? The gaming application has several apps. They have different strategies in cross-sell and stuff like that. It's the name of volumes and app store ranking. But when you're talking about e-commerce and travel, they have one application, right? Booking.com, that's one application. So the lifetime value can be very high if you do the acquisition right. Now, it's not only that, and probably the other friends here, when you set the KPIs in the right way, you can segment your audience within the application, so you can further retarget these specific users using the RTB that you just mentioned. I think RTB is only for that, right? It's not, maybe not for, maybe you can do something else there right now. I mean, it's not yet developed, but maybe, I mean, for RTB to get these specific audiences, you can use RTB, different RTBs, Facebook, call to action, remarketing within Google, and a few other companies out there that are doing active re-engagement and retargeting. So this is for the higher lifetime value clients that we have.
Got it. I just wanted to take a quick poll in the audience. If you can raise your hand, if you have a mobile app that's a game. And how about non-games? Okay, got it. Thanks.
I see someone that have all out there. Yeah.
Thanks. I think there's enough brain power up here. What would you say are some of the best practices, especially amongst the tracking companies, because you're seeing such a broad spectrum of companies? Best practices or emerging practices as we see the mobile environment today. Maybe I'll start with
Yeah, I don't think there's any silver bullet, that there's one thing over another that I would say is these are must-dos. I think the first thing that you'll hear, especially from us being in the attribution game and everyone up here, is having good discipline around ingestion of data and tracking. I think in order to be an intelligent user acquisition manager, you got to know where you're having success and not having success. So I think that's the first and foremost, is we continue to see people media buying without having the proper tracking in place, which is somewhat asinine in my opinion. So I think that's first thing. Second thing is not to rest on your laurels and constantly testing, because just because certain media sources worked today doesn't mean that they're going to work tomorrow. And even in situations where you might have worked with certain partners that have not worked, things change. And so I think you have to be constantly in market, looking for new sources and testing different creative and looking at new emerging technologies that are coming out from different networks around what Facebook's doing. Big announcements in the news over the last quarter around, both Google and Yahoo are getting into the app install business. And then you have everything that you're hearing in the press about programmatic. So I think you constantly have to be challenging yourself and your team to look for new and emerging sources.
I totally agree here. Although you have these big companies out there like Facebook trying out new sources constantly, and it's not only about sources basically. I mean, on Facebook we have plans with thousands of campaigns and different targeting. Some of them work, some of them doesn't. So it's all Facebook. But I think that we have like one client that is utilizing more than 300 different ad networks at once. Why? They need the volume. But in the end of the day, it's a matter of measurement. I don't want to get back to there. But trying out different sources that in the market, that's crucial. This is how you can find your hidden gems here and there, hit on them, and this is how you grow. That's number one. Number two is following the market, because the market is changing rapidly. I don't know, you guys in the Android world know that they're going to pull IMEI out, the Android device ID, and they are following Apple regulations that they did lately. So Android is not that open. I mean, they do some regulation about that, and everybody needs to be aware of it, because if you are having your databases all around IMEIs, oops, August, not going to have it, and you're going to lose a lot of data. So you need to be prepared. You need to have your partners prepared for that.
Ditto. I won't waste the time repeating all those things. I agree with all of those points. I think the only thing I'd want to add is bringing it down a layer of detail on measurement. We have a lot of customers who have lots of different campaigns across lots of different sources, just like Oren had highlighted for one of his clients. What you see when that happens is a few things. One is the role of the look-back window. The look-back window is the time between the click and the first launch of the app that is kind of in scope for a cost per install campaign. That's what a look-back window is. In tools like ours, I'm sure, in the case with these guys, you can actually control the look-back window, and you can negotiate with a publisher to say, I'm going to give you a 7-day look-back window. I'm going to give you a 30-day look-back window. I'm going to give you a 2-day look-back window. Well, if you think about the economics of giving one vendor a 2-day look-back window and another vendor a 7-day, is that anyone who does not launch the first time within 2 days doesn't get counted to that network. And so it's going to be a more expensive install. But they're going to have a much higher intent. And so as an advertiser, when you have measurement, you have the ability to kind of keep the ecosystem on their toes working for you, which is to say, I want to be able to give you as high of a CPI as you want, Mr. Vendor, but I want results. I want them installing within 48 hours. I want them engaging more than 3 times by D3. I want done to done to done to done. You have to have measurement to do that, but you also have to have a perspective like we've been talking about, which is, how do I make money as an advertiser? How do you as an advertiser make money? And these are the KPIs that you care about, and just kind of demanding those in that process. So I think that's going to be what people are going to see more and more often over the next 6 months, is with data that's actionable through measuring tools like all the vendors here, advertisers are going to have the ability to have much more control over the definition of a dynamic I/O. View-through attribution really was put on the map in mobile by Facebook. It was very much present in online, but no one was doing it in mobile. And when Facebook started their campaigns, they did view-through attribution. And now all of a sudden, Shazam! Everyone wants to do view-through attribution. I did Flurry, threw that in there. I don't know if you guys ran into that, but they magically started doing view-through attribution, but didn't tell their customer. Anyways, long story short, how things are measured, I think, is going to be a big thing. The other one is influence reports. So, we track things like clicks that did not result in the install, but influenced the install. And why that's important? Because when you've got a lot of publishers out there who are using mediation tools to sell to the highest bidder, like what James was talking about with RTB, advertisers start to bid against themselves. But with an influence report, you actually get a sense of where you have high probabilities or high volumes of that circumstance happening, and you can flush it out. So again, it's all about data, and I think I'm just seeing the same thing these guys are saying, but these are the examples that you should be looking at over the next 6 months.
James, I had a question for you. From an ad unit perspective, how is native ads playing with your UA strategy?
Sure. So this is still early stage for us. We only have a few sources that sort of consistently have a lot of native ads, but I would say overall it's been the results that we've seen have been very, very, I would say, telling. Sort of the click-through rates we've seen have maybe been 2 to 5 times higher. The value resulting in sort of higher value users and users having a better experience with the ad unit. So as a result, your effective CPIs and your effective CPCs are also lower. So overall, the user has a much better experience with it. I've yet to see, I still don't know exactly where it's going to go, how big the scale it's going to be, but it looks like, obviously the top networks, the top sources are all adopting it. It's because it benefits both, not only me, the advertiser, but also the publisher, the one that's actually making the money as well. So I think it's definitely going to be a big force in the ecosystem in the next 6 months, and you're going to see, I think you're going to see it taking over. But yeah, in the near term, it's definitely having big results from my spend.
From an incent versus non-incent perspective, James, how are you breaking those out? And how are you breaking those out by platform?
Incent versus non-incent. What I always like to say is that you can find value in any channel that you buy through, any channel. And whenever someone comes to me and says, hey, what do you think about this channel? I heard it's really crappy. Yeah, I hate that because I think you can squeeze money out of any channel you buy through, well, except for maybe 1 or 2. But I think you can literally get as much value as you pay, as much value out of the channel as much as you pay, as long as you optimize and as long as you understand what you're getting. So it's very important to understand sort of what the goal is when you're approaching each channel, whether it's volume, return, a certain type of customer, a certain geo. You need to understand what you want out of it, and what you're optimizing towards. But my objective is I buy across several channels, and I would say sometimes I do buy some incentive traffic as well. I typically don't buy much burst traffic, but there's definitely value in every single one of these channels, whether they're lower quality publishers or higher quality publishers. I'm willing to pay what they're worth. And so me as an advertiser, I like to stay very consistent across all my sources, and all my networks can probably tell you that.
Just from the macro perspective, are you seeing incent mainly being used in the gaming vertical, or are you seeing that in other verticals, and by platform, or kind of what's your thoughts on it?
We see other vertical, which doesn't make sense basically because most of the traffic is coming from games. So if I'm playing a game, I want to see another game, so that could be a fit as opposed to some reader or utility that what's the chances that I'm going to use it? Low. But if I'm buying it at a lower price and I'm profitable, I'm maintaining profitability, that's perfectly fine, and you can call it names, it doesn't really matter. There is a cost, a revenue, that's it. And the story with incent, non-incent, just it's overrated. It's overrated. I mean, they can get you volume. You just need to measure that. That's it.
Just a follow-up comment. I would say, every user has a price. Every impression has a price. It just comes down to a effective CPI. What I'm seeing and hearing is most incent traffic continues to come out of the gaming space. Other verticals tend to look much more on LTV, and I would say I'm not seeing mass adoption in travel or retail because of that.
I just want to touch base really on retargeting and deep linking, and from a strategic perspective, how is that? I'll start with James, and I'll broaden that out. how are you utilizing, or are you utilizing retargeting through LinkedIn strategies, and kind of can you overview that if so?
Yeah, sure. So this is, I think retargeting and deep linking it's one of the themes of 2014. There's pretty much every vendor out there is offering retargeting right now, if they weren't originally. And so everyone's diversifying, and a lot of vendors are becoming homogenous because they don't want to sort of be tied to one strategy. Myself, at Storm8, we're not currently pursuing retargeting or deep linking right now. Mainly because it depends on the goal of your company and your strategy. And so Storm8, our goal is to sort of broaden our network to the largest extent, and I'm constantly seeking out sort of new users and new sources of traffic and new channels and new people that I haven't touched already. I do believe that there's value in re-engagement and retargeting, but as it stands currently, I'm still sort of interested in expanding the network.
Start with Oren.
I think that for gaming, it's less important. I think that for e-commerce, travel, higher lifetime value, that totally makes sense. This is probably not going to be 2014. It's probably going to take another year for that to get and to really kick in, because right now the market is focused on installs and engagement, not necessarily re-engagement. Because the market right now is dominated by gaming and the gaming industry, it doesn't make sense for them to invest on this. Once brands, e-commerce, travel apps will invest more, they will get into retargeting if they want it or not. I think it will take some time. I think it's going to take until the end of this year and next year. But right now we see this is like another password, because the market is very fast, right? And they need this password. So once it's said, now it's retargeting. Yes, it's interesting, but it's not quite there. And I suggest that for the gaming industry, they can engage with that, but that's specially designed, as I see it, for higher lifetime value e-commerce applications, heavy applications, that the re-engagement can be very, very powerful.
Yeah, so Oren and I will deviate a little bit on this. We're seeing re-engagement a lot. We're seeing it a lot, certainly in commerce, as you had highlighted, but we are seeing it in gaming. It's manifesting itself differently in gaming. What we're observing, and again, everything's different, but what we're observing is almost a rat race of retargeting companies going after any segment of user or cohort of user that becomes inactive after D3 or D7. So what's happening is the growth guys within a gaming company is saying, if the person is no longer active as of D3 or D7, and activity could be engagement, session, frequency, but it also is most of the time in-app purchases. They're not starting to buy things by D3. I'm going to put them in a dynamic segment where they get retargeted. And then all of a sudden, the Tap Commerce of the world, the Action X's of the world, all the PMDs for Facebook are taking that live feed and just trying to eat each other's lunch to retarget that same audience user to get them back on board. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, I think it's weird and odd. It took me by surprise when I started seeing that happening. But interestingly, the desire of those retargeting companies is for all of the revenue after the retarget event happens to get now attributed to them. So someone who's been pre-primed to install the app just becomes a little inactive, and arguably maybe it's not a little, maybe 2 or 3 days is big enough based on how the data drives the decision. But after 3 days, maybe 7 days, all of a sudden a bunch of PMDs and retargeting companies go after that specific custom audience with specific creative. Come on back, we miss you at the game, all these like specific target messages, and they start buying. And now all of a sudden, that's a valuable user now attributed to the retargeting company, not the originating attribution source. If you think about the unintended consequences of that, they're pretty profound, because it means that the last guy in will continue to be a pretty strong message, as opposed to all the people who are influencing those decisions along the way. And I fundamentally believe once all these rocks kind of mellow out a little bit, everyone in the value chain is going to start getting paid. You're going to have fractional attribution where If you're driving impressions that end up resulting in an install, whether you have a last click or not, you'll get something. If you have a click somewhere in that thread, you'll get something. If you have an install, you'll get something. If you have a retarget, you'll get something. And only if you have good measurement technologies that can manifest that to support the IOs will it actually happen at scale, which is what's important. If it doesn't happen at scale, it doesn't matter.
We have 3 minutes, so I wanted to, just go around the panel and just say, we have app developers here. What would be maybe a couple key points of advice that we haven't covered already that they should incorporate into their UA strategy? Although we covered a lot, so.
We did. My one comment is you own your data, make the best use out of it to make it actionable for you, and deliver the results that matter to you.
I would say mine is have the right measurement tools in place, understand exactly what a user is worth to you. That's different for a lot of different developers with different objectives. Understand what that is and optimize. Get, by geo, by device, down to the publisher level, as granular as you can be. Optimize and squeeze the value out of every single source that you can.
Actually, the retargeting is just another word, an option that you need to measure, right? Instead, not instead, retargeting, not retargeting, Facebook, not Facebook. Hey, there is a business to run. Revenue minus cost, that's ROI. And this is how you need to focus because tomorrow there is another animal there and you need to hit it. But in the end of the day, you need to measure. So we get back to measurement. This is how measurement is always really important. And that's it. I'm not going to get into too complex stuff, but
All great points. Just please measure past the install.
Thank you so much for your comments. I did want to put in a couple ideas. If you're running campaigns on Facebook, you should try and optimize the creative every 2 to 3 days.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a best practice. One of the big trends that I see for 2014 is advertisers or publishers being able to utilize the phone book of the user to do SMS and drive viral CPI and bring down the cost there. I think one of the things, talking about, James, and transparency, I think probably next 3 months, 3 to 6 months, we're going to see a lot of transparency come into the space. There's technology right now that's going to start to roll out that will allow an agency or an advertiser to figure out where an ad unit is being run on which publisher and eliminate a lot of the ad networks that we currently have in place. With that, I'd like everyone to just give a round of applause to our panel, and thank you so much for your time.